Welcome to PeopleMetrics Live. Today, we're going to be reviewing our recommended three-step strategy for a mid-year check-in of your 2021 CX program. Now, before we dive in, let's do some quick introductions. My name is Kirk. I've been an account manager here at PeopleMetrics for a number of years, running a number of our customer feedback programs, and I'm here to share my expertise. And I'm joined by the director of our customer success team, Audrey Skwersky. And Audrey, I'll turn it over to you for some introductions.
Yeah, hi everyone. Like Kirk said, I run the customer success team here at PeopleMetrics. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, and I'm excited to be here.
So to kick it off, Audrey, a lot does go into setting up a customer experience program. You got to have stakeholders, sometimes interviews, journey mapping, IT involvement. And after that, people can have just a set it and forget it mentality. What are your thoughts? And can you tell us about, what to do after that program is started?
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, what usually happens is there's this whole initiative to get a program up and running off the ground. Lots of people are involved. There's a lot of attention on it. And then people launch their survey and think we're in the clear, which in some cases is true. But what we really want to drive home is that it's not a set it and forget it type of thing. You have to regularly check in on your program. Are you still asking the right questions? You have to manage the data you're collecting. Are you making changes based on the feedback that you have? And really, mid-year check-ins are a great time to do that. So it's a good period of point in time to say, let me take a look at what's going on with my program, take an inventory, and see, am I really doing what I should be doing to make sure that my program's not stale.
Yeah, and I think stale is a great way to put it because, the way I see it is the customer experience isn't static over the year. What you do as a company isn't static. Yeah, and your program can't be static either, because if it is, it's going to be lagging behind the rest of it.
I've seen some instances where I'll get a survey, and this is not anyone that we've worked with, but from interactions that I have out in the world, I'll get a survey asking about something about a summer promotion, but it's winter or something like that, where clearly no one has checked up on what questions are being asked or what's going on with their program. And our founder, Sean McDade, says this all the time, that your survey is another touch point in your customer experience, that it's really important that you make taking the survey a good experience, just as you care for everything else.
Yeah, and that is also, it reminds me, as far as I think everyone on this call will understand, but when we think of, why does this matter in the first place? There is a good body of research of understanding the customer experience having a major impact, in that if you have a good customer experience, that leads to greater customer retention. That leads to greater customer spend, leads to long-term loyalty, referrals to other customers as well who could buy from you. And so you need to make sure that you're getting your money's worth from this CX program and actually improving the experience you provide.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, with that, we do have these 3 steps, the 3 things that we recommend you should do for your mid-year check-in. So why don't I go ahead and kick it off? Perfect. We do have 3 steps that we can share on our screen here. So I'll go ahead, pull it up, and let's go ahead and kick it off. Audrey, do you want to kick us off with number 1?
Yeah. So the first one is make sure you're setting goals. So if you don't have one, that's the absolute first place to start. And often programs kick off without goals, and that's okay. I mean, mid-year check-in is a great time to take stock of where you're at and say, okay, here's where I am, but you know what? I want to be here. I want to be up 10 points in NPS, or I want my CSAT to be higher, or I want to lower detractors, or follow up with more customers. But whatever it is, you need to at least set a goal so you have something to work towards. If you do already have a goal, this is a great time of year to review your progress. How are you tracking? What do your numbers look like at mid-year? Are you on track to meet your goals? Do you need to make adjustments in one way or another? Does your actual goal need to be adjusted? And these are all things that that make sense to review at this mid-year point in time. The other thing is, and you can see it on the slide, is benchmarking against others. So this is a good time to see what are other like companies doing, people in the same industry or of the same size or same customer type. What NPS are they at, or CSAT, or you know, what makes sense to compare and not compare. And this again is a good time to kind of take a look, make sure you have a goal, tweak your goal if things aren't going the way you expect them to, or maybe you're way above your goal and you need to set a new reach goal. You know, it could be any number of things, but now is a perfect time to do your check-in and make sure that you have a goal and it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the common thread that you touched on there, Audrey, is that when you're setting a goal, whether you have one now, whether you have one already, or whether you're setting one for the first time, or whether you have one already, your goal for CSAT, NPS, whatever, you know, effort, ease, whatever question you're asking, it should be something that is attainable, but also aspirational. So there is a kind of sweet spot there where you don't want your goal to be so low that it's, you know, oh, we will hit that right away. We already hit that. But you don't want it to be so high that people think that is absolutely out of reach. And in that case, it's not actually a true motivator, not helpful for you. So certainly, as Audrey was saying, when you start a program, it's best to not have a goal in the first place, because you need to find out where you are, you know, relative to where that goal should be. And then, of course, even once you have a goal in place, make sure it's filling that niche of, you know, if you've hit your goal, that's great. Might be time to tweak, readjust, set that new aspiration, set that stretch goal, and make sure you're going somewhere good. And then even for the benchmarks themselves, if you're benchmarking against other companies, make sure it's something that there's some parity, certainly in the questions and in the methodology. Because if you have a benchmark that's just well below where you are, that's no reason to rest on your laurels and think, we figured it out. Our customer experience is where it needs to be. So make sure it's filling the purpose of giving you a goal.
Absolutely. And sometimes it doesn't have to be an exact goal. I mean, if you have a negative NPS starting out, that's okay. You have plenty of room to go up. Maybe your goal is that you just want your NPS to be positive. Like that's your first milestone. Let me get my NPS into those positive numbers, and then we'll go from there. So it doesn't necessarily have to be based on what other people are doing, but you want to look at where you are at this point in time, and then make sure that you set a goal that makes sense for you and your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. That really is the key thing. It's all about this should be our kind of guiding light to improving the customer experience. If you either don't have a goal, then you are kind of blind without it. But if your goal isn't very helpful, then you need to make sure it is providing that guiding light. Okay. Well, that's the first one. I want to jump on into the second one, and I'll kick this one off.
Sure.
Is kind of making sure that you are reaching the right audience with who it is that you're reaching out to. Now, the first key part of this is the touch points. So commonly when a program starts out, you don't want to survey every touch point. You don't want to reach your customer at every point where they interact with you, because that's overwhelming. However, now that you're at mid-year, it could be a good time to think, is it time for us to expand, time for us to build out into our full customer journey, into other touch points we might not be hitting at the moment? That's definitely the big one. And the second, reaching the right audience, is making sure you are actually updating the survey itself. So within the audience you're already touching, are you asking the correct questions? And that can speak to what Audrey just mentioned of some questions are just temporary, and you need to make sure you are constantly tending this garden or tending whatever this is and asking questions that are relevant to your customers at the moment. And it could also be that you found some issue in the survey, or you found an issue in your customer experience from your survey today that you want to dive further into. And so mid-year is a good chance to say, all right, we've learned all these things from customer feedback so far. Here's something I want to learn more about. Now I'm going to add this question and really make this a new focus for the second half of the year. That's all.
I think that's a really good point about learning things from the survey. You're getting comments from people in your survey when you ask for more information or for them to share feedback about different aspects of customer experience, and they're providing that for you. That's a gold mine of information where you can use that and say, oh, I see things about billing are being mentioned often. Let me dive into that and see what the problem about billing is. And maybe you want to add a question or two related to what you're reading in those comments. So make sure you're using that data to your advantage. And this mid-year check-in is a perfect time to kind of take stock and see what are people talking about, and are these things important to me? How can I include it in my survey or make changes and then communicate that out? So make sure you're reaching your audience, the right audience, with both touch points. So are you surveying at all the experiences that your customers have? And then make sure you're asking the right questions when people are mentioning things or you've made changes and you need to find a way to relay that to your audience.
Yeah, and jumping back to that touch points one, if you aren't surveying kind of all your touch points and you're wondering where do I expand to from here, it is good to think about what's that next most important moment of truth. So in the customer experience space, that's going to be different for every company, but in banking, it's often going to be you come into the bank and you have a teller transaction. That's a key everyday touch point. Or you're using our online mobile tools, using our app, you're using our portal. How is that experience? It's an everyday experience. And you want to work your way down from there. What are these most critical moments and expand out and get it right from there into customer support, new account openings, new loans. So whatever that industry is for you, you're generally going to have an understanding of what are those core and key touch points where we need to make sure that we get it right every time, and build it out from there. So I think when you're doing that journey mapping, that should be a good guide for you. And of course, when you're starting a program, you cannot, and we really don't recommend that you start with every touch point, but you do want to build out to that. And MidYear is another great time to continue that build.
Right. I imagine you've prioritized your touch points when you're getting a program off the ground, but just because you have prioritized something doesn't mean that the other touch points aren't important. The idea is always to make sure that you're including them all. It just often has to be in a phased approach. So mid-year check-in, again, great time to take a look at what that priority list is and bring in the next one or two touch points into your program.
Yeah, and again, that's something that exactly as you said, Audrey, you probably have a sense of that already. But that's another thing you could glean from the survey feedback, because what you'll find is customers are going to talk about what is important to them, regardless of whether or not that's necessarily what the survey was about. So they might, they might give you insights into how you change your survey questions. And then they also may give you an insight into here's another touch point we need to ask more about, because I just keep hearing about this billing experience, or I just keep hearing about this other element that we need to change. And maybe one last thing I note on this that probably isn't likely, but say you do have full coverage of every single touch point. That's great. Maybe you've got that full consistency across everything, and you're mapping it all. Still, you don't want to rest on your laurels at that point. Often, where our customers go once they've kind of mapped the full customer journey is to understand that your customers have a journey, outside of that. Is that perhaps part of the sales process? Is part of the learning process to become a customer? There's journeys before customer that, can go well or can go poorly that you may want to learn about. So prospective customer, as a touch point, and then lost customer as a touch point as well. You want to learn, the first focus is for your customers today, how do you better serve them? But you do want to branch out once you've really gotten a handle on that into how are we serving around those edges from before you've kind of joined us, and then when you've chosen to leave, why was that the case?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that about covers us for kind of the second thing. That's a good kind of mid-year point. And now on to, you want to take the last one, Audrey, for?
Yeah, let's head over to the third one. And this one is, are you sharing your results, or you should be sharing your results? So adoption of these programs is often where we kind of fall short, where, people did all the work to get it set up and it's running and everyone feels great. But are people logging in and looking at the data? Are reports going out sharing the customer experience based on this information that you're collecting? Are you following up on regular responses, on negative responses? And then really, and I think this one often gets overlooked, but it's probably the most important, is that you're sharing your success stories within your company. But each of these is kind of its own thing, and we can expand more on each. But overall, we want to make sure you're sharing results. So one thing you can do is set up reports to be shared on a regular cadence, either monthly or quarterly, going out with your data. So you've collected data, and then you can use your customer experience program provider, PeopleMetrics in this case, to schedule a report that goes out to a group of people that need to know what's going on with the program. So they can see, oh, my NPS went up or went down, my CSAT changed, or, we had a lot of problems in the last month. I need to look at what's going on there. And the program is only powerful and useful if people have access to the data and are able to see exactly what's going on. So that's a really big one. At PeopleMetrics, we have unlimited user licenses. So we allow anybody within a company to come and log in and look at the data with data restrictions if necessary. But we want to make sure that people have access to the CX program.
Yeah, and that really is critical, because something about customer experience work is that it's not a pricing study, it's not market research, it's customer experience, which everyone, most everyone in the company is customer facing, has a responsibility. And even if you're not customer facing, you need to understand how your role impacts the customer experience. So you want folks to get their data and understand their data. And it's likely, if you set this program up properly, you may already have these regular reports. And then if you have these in place already, at the mid-year check-in, what you want to do is just make sure that you're capturing the right things. Because the first iteration of these reports, it might be something that you need to tweak. So ask yourself, do I have the right metrics on these dashboards? Am I putting the right information first? Often when you're doing these designs, there's multiple people involved. They may want pieces of data that kind of clutter up these reports, clutter up the dashboards. So use this time at the check-in to say, what are folks actually using throughout the year? Can I remove some elements of these dashboards or of these reports so it's just front and center? What is helpful for you as the manager of the customer experience to act on and improve the experience that we provide? So that sending regular reports for a mid-year check-in, it's an opportunity not only for you to just make sure you're sending these out, but to make sure you're sending the right data out.
Definitely. And then talking about following up on negative responses. So one way to do this is to make sure that you have a loop closing program in place. But you also want to check, is it actually working? Is it happening? How many negative responses did I get? And how many did we follow up on? Does everybody have access to log in to look at these and make the necessary notes once they've talked to customers? I had a client recently who we did a mid-year check-in, and we noticed that when you looked at their overall numbers, that most of the negative responses had been followed up on, but we could see a fall off in the last month in June. And it looks like people, got busy with other things and had sort of slowed down on following up with those responses in June. And so the mid-year check-in was a great time to notice that and put a plan in place to make sure that it doesn't fall by the wayside. It doesn't get, swept to the back of the priority list, and because it's so important. So great time to check in and make sure that your team is doing what you're supposed to do, that the plan that you put in place at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the program is still in action and is making sense, and to make changes where you need to make the program the best that it can be.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think on following up on negative responses, that's really not an optional component of these programs. You need to make sure folks are doing, because it is so important. And we've seen in our own research how, if you have a negative experience and you correct that negative experience, your customer can be happier after that and had they never had a problem in the first place. Just because there's a sense that this company is actually responsive. I might not expect perfection every time, but I expect that if something goes wrong, it'll be corrected. And you've shown that you're willing to do that. And so, with these customer experience programs, if you have members of your team who maybe have never used this kind of program, who aren't used to following up on negative responses, you need to make sure that there is that appreciation of why this is important and how that needs to be done. So this is a critical part of operations. It's not just some, fun add-on or some optional to do. This is critical because it's a customer, just as they would kind of submit a trouble ticket or call to let you know they had a problem. Survey is an avenue for them to say something needs to be fixed, and you need to act on that just as critically as you would any other way they tell you they have a problem.
Yeah, this is so important. You're giving your customers an avenue to give you this, to provide this information to you. And if you don't do anything with it, you're really going to leave a bad taste in their mouth. They took the time and effort to share with you their experience and what was going on. And they, at minimum, they expect some sort of follow-up to say, we heard you and this is what we're going to do about it.
Yeah. And that actually does really speak to that last one of sharing success stories, and why that's so important is to communicate. This isn't just work I'm asking you to do. This is something that has an impact, and that's really critical for these programs. Is when you're managing a team, you don't just want to communicate to them, this is another task for you to complete. It's this is something that is a benefit to you. This is something where we're going to be able to identify changes and resolve issues so they happen less frequently, which will make your day-to-day just better for not just your customers, but for the whole team, that we can better serve our customers and experience fewer problems. And so when you are identifying kind of larger trends, making changes to your customer experience based on the feedback that's collected, sharing that success story internally, not just to customers, but also to your employees as well, is going to be critical for getting them to buy into the program and getting them to want to keep engaging with it. So that really ties into everything else here, in that they're going to want to engage with those reports. They're going to want to follow up with those responses if they know something actually comes of this.
Absolutely. And it's such a powerful tool for them to see the payoff from doing all the hard work that they're doing, that people really do have positive experiences and will share them back to you. And it's so important to see it across teams, and that, that everybody's effort really does make a difference.
Great. Yeah. And I think, one thing looking across all three of these, mid-year priorities or mid-year, this mid-year strategy, certainly these are important every day. These are things that are just part of the core management of the program. But for a mid-year check-in, they are really great because often, within large organizations, it provides that anchor of, we're taking a look because we've hit this milestone. We want to make sure we have our goals in place. We want to make sure everyone's using these programs. So it just gives you a framework of, at this point of the year, we want to make sure we're hitting our goals kind of by the end of the year. And so while these are important things to do every day, mid-year is a great time to just take a step back and take a larger look and make sure that kind of at a larger level, you are doing all three of these.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is not to say that you shouldn't be doing this at any other time of the year. This is just a good time to make sure that you're doing them. Sort of take a step back and say, can I put a check mark next to all of these things? Am I doing them? Are we doing it in a way that makes sense? What do we need to change? And mid-year is a good time to change it. But certainly don't forget about these things the rest of the year.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, Audrey, any other thoughts on these? We do have a couple questions I can jump to, unless there's anything else you want to share.
Yeah, I think we covered it. Let's jump over to the questions.
All right. Okay, I see two here. First question is, how do I set an NPS goal if I'm just starting out?
Yeah, so I think a good thing to do is to get your program up and running, launch your program, and then give yourself some time to get a baseline so you know where you're starting. I mean, a good thing, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, is that you want your NPS to be positive. So Net Promoter Score can be range from -100 to +100. You want to be on that positive side of the scale. So that's a good goal to start with if you really have no idea where you're at. And then I would recommend launch your program and get enough data to set a baseline, so you know where you need to go from that baseline. You might end up with an NPS of 5 or 20 or 30. You're not sure where you're going to start, and that will help you in setting a goal.
Yeah, NPS, definitely that baseline is very important because NPS is a very variable metric by design. It can fluctuate. It's supposed to be sensitive. So if something is going wrong, you're going to know right away. And it has that negative 100 to 100 swing. So definitely a baseline is important. So you're not setting a goal and then finding yourself jumping all around at this goal that you have. And then exactly as Audrey said, from there, just pick what makes sense after you have that baseline, whether that's 20 more points from that or 30 more or whatever it is. Is what makes sense to you, or even just vaguely, or just broadly getting positive, or getting onto the other side of some milestone. So great, perfect. And the last question I have here is it relates to the last one on that sharing results of what do you recommend to really drive that program adoption to get people to use it.
I think a lot of the things that we mentioned today are really helpful in driving program adoption. One is making sure that you have a plan for loop closing in place and people know what to do when they receive an alert that there was a less than stellar customer experience. Some of the other things about, excuse me, regularly sharing data. So do you have regular reports scheduled to go out? Have you allowed all of your employees to log in and see what's going on with scores? And then just really sharing results regularly, that including those success stories, I think are ways to increase program adoption.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think, and I think the only thing I would add to that is leadership buy-in is so critical for these programs, and it helps flow from there of setting goals and making sure folks do these things. And so for that leadership buy-in, it helps to show exactly as I was saying, those success stories. And the great thing about customer experience data is it's very easy to show why it's important. If you have these pool of survey responses, you can show it's always the case that these detractors, if it's an NPS, they're going to have lower spend. They are more likely to churn in the future. We've done that for a number of our customers. So you can show very, just very clearly, here's a financial impact of us not improving the customer experience. And you can say, if we improve it by X much, we can improve our financials by Y. And so you get that leadership buy-in and then follow these steps here that we've outlined. And from there, that should certainly help drive it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really good point.
Great. Okay. Well, with that, those are the questions we have, and I think we are just about at time here. And so I guess I just say, Audrey, thank you for joining. This has been a great overview of kind of those 3 steps for a successful mid-year check-in. So thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. I hope that this has been a valuable conversation for everybody that we've got on the line. We'll make sure that when this goes up on the YouTube channel, we include a link to download this diagram that we've shared so you can use that as a reference when you're planning your own mid-year check-in. If you do have any colleagues or friends who couldn't make it to today's session, no worries. You can always find our recordings on our YouTube channel, and you'll also find links there to sign up for future sessions of PeopleMetrics Live. You can explore our blog, get copies of our founder's book, Listen or Die, which is now on Amazon, and his coming book, Pharma Customer Experience, which is coming out later this year. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear about what you're working on and give you a tour of PeopleMetrics, our experience management platform, and just the work that we do. So you can find links to all that and more on our YouTube channel. So thank you again for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon for another edition of PeopleMetrics Live. Bye-bye, all.